It was a cold, foggy evening in the quiet town of Ravenswood. The streets were empty, and the only sound was the distant ticking of the old clock tower. Detective Arthur Lane sat in his cozy study, sipping tea and reading a book by the fireplace. His peaceful evening was interrupted by a loud knock on the door. Standing on the doorstep was a frantic woman, her face pale and her hands trembling. She introduced herself as Mrs. Eleanor Whitaker, the wife of a wealthy merchant. "Detective Lane, you must help me. Something terrible has happened," she cried. Detective Lane invited her in and offered her a seat. "Calm down, Mrs. Whitaker. Tell me what's wrong." Between sobs, she explained. "Last night, someone broke into our mansion and stole the 7 silver spoons. They are not just ordinary spoons. They are a family heirloom, passed down for generations. Each spoon is engraved with a unique symbol, and together they are priceless. Without them, my husband will be devastated." Detective Lane listened carefully. "Were there any signs of forced entry?" he asked. "No," she replied. "The doors and windows were locked. The thief must have had a key or known the house well." Detective Lane grabbed his coat and hat. "Let's go to your mansion. I need to see the scene of the crime." The Whitaker mansion was a grand, old building with tall windows and a sprawling garden. Detective Lane examined the doors and windows, but found no signs of tampering. He then asked to see the dining room, where the spoons had been kept in a glass display case. The case was now empty, and the lock was intact. "Who has access to this room?" Detective Lane asked. "Only my husband, myself, and our butler, Mr. Grayson," Mrs. Whitaker replied. Detective Lane decided to interview the butler first. Mr. Grayson was a tall, stern man in his 50s. He seemed nervous when questioned. "Mr. Grayson, did you notice anything unusual last night?" Detective Lane asked. The butler hesitated. "No, sir. Everything was as usual. I locked the doors and windows before retiring to my room." Detective Lane noticed a faint scratch on the butler's hand. "How did you get that scratch, Mr. Grayson?" The butler looked startled. "Oh, it's nothing. I must have scratched it while cleaning." Detective Lane wasn't convinced. He excused himself and began to search the mansion. In the butler's room, he found a small key hidden under the mattress. It matched the lock on the display case. Confronted with the evidence, Mr. Grayson broke down. "I didn't mean to steal the spoons. I was forced to do it. A man threatened to harm my family if I didn't help him." Detective Lane pressed him for details. "Who was this man?" "I don't know his name," the butler said. "He wore a black coat and a hat. He said he would contact me again tonight at the old clock tower." That night, Detective Lane and the butler waited near the clock tower. As the clock struck midnight, a shadowy figure appeared. It was the man in the black coat. Detective Lane stepped forward. "The game is up. Hand over the spoons." The man laughed. "You're too late, Detective. The spoons are already gone." But Detective Lane had anticipated this. He had asked the police to surround the area. Within moments, the man was arrested. Under questioning, the thief revealed that he had hidden the spoons in a secret compartment in the mansion's library. Detective Lane retrieved them and returned them to Mrs. Whitaker. The case was solved, but Detective Lane couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Why were the spoons so valuable? And who was the mysterious man in the black coat? As he left the mansion, Mrs. Whitaker handed him a small engraved silver spoon. "This is for you, Detective, a token of our gratitude." Detective Lane smiled. Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker. But the real mystery is why these spoons are so special. She leaned in and whispered, each spoon holds a secret. Together, they reveal the location of a hidden treasure. But that's a story for another time. And with that, Detective Lane walked into the foggy night, ready for his next adventure.